Hello guys, welcome back to another Graviteh NHL Power Rankings. Now in this series, I look through every single NHL team 31 to 1 and I rank them, so if you want to find out who's number 1, make sure you stick around. Now, at number 31, I have the Detroit Red Wings. They were 31 last week, so no improvements, of course, no downgrades for them. Their record right now is 1-6-2, obviously the worst record in the NHL. And so far from Detroit, I predicted them to be last place. Most of you guys already know that. So I'm pretty much looking at what they were, and I predicted exactly what would happen. They can't score, they can't defend, and they can't get any goaltending. Right now, it's pretty much a disaster for Detroit. At number 30, I have the Los Angeles Kings. They're at a 2-6-1 record, -5 ranking from last week, and it's really simple. The Los Angeles Kings have lost 5 straight games, and it's just not working out for them. The goaltending hasn't been great, the defense has looked old, and of course the forward group is a lot older, so they're not able to score as many goals as they used to, and right now that's a huge problem for LA going forward, but right now they're experiencing that oldness, and they're experiencing that decay. At number 29, I have the New York Rangers. They right now have a 3-5-1 record. Right now they are a +0. They were 29 last week, so it's pretty much the same week from them. Even though they got a couple of wins, they look decent this week. I just feel like their record right now still shows them to be a bad team, and maybe if they can get on a little winning streak, they'll climb up. But right now, I think it's a little bit of a fluke for the wins that they've been getting. Speaking of flukes, at 28, I have the Florida Panthers, and they're right now at a 2-3-3 record, a -4 from last week, and they just barely got their second win. It wasn't a very good week from them. They lost versus Detroit, they lost versus New York Rangers, and honestly, they have not impressed me whatsoever. The goaltending has been a problem, but that offense has been okay, but that defense, it really needs to step up defensively, because right now it's been a tire fire from them. I did predict Florida to make the playoffs, so probably #RavJinx, but for right now, they just not impressed me whatsoever. At number 27, I have the St. Louis Blues. They're right now at a 2-3-3 record. They're a +1 from last week, but they did get that win versus Toronto, which was very, very good for them. But right now, St. Louis is still down the dumpster when it comes to the standings. And right now, just overall, I haven't liked what I've seen from them. The goaltending has been shaky, the defense has been okay, and that offense just hasn't really gotten going. And for St. Louis right now, they've been pretty inconsistent, and this past week showed it. They did get that win versus Toronto, but overall, it still wasn't the greatest week from them. At number 26, I have the New York Islanders. They're at a 3-4-1 record, a +1 from last week, but that last week was not the greatest for New York. They got a couple of big losses, and it just did not really work out for them. And for New York, they're right about where everybody expected, which is bottom 5 in the standings, or at least in my power rankings, and so far there's really been no surprises for New York. At number 25, I have the Philadelphia Flyers. They're sitting at a 4-5-0 record. They're -7 from last week, and it's been mainly because of the inconsistency from them. I just don't know what to feel of Philadelphia. Sometimes they look fantastic, sometimes they look terrible, and really right now, I just don't have a lot of confidence in them making the playoffs, especially with that shaky goaltending, which once again has been pretty terrible. So for me right now, I just don't know Philadelphia's identity, which will probably lead them into the bottom of the standings. At number 24, I have the Arizona Coyotes. They're right now at a 3-5-0 record, a +6 from last week, and this past week, I really like what I've seen from them. That was a big win versus Columbus, and to me, I've always felt that Arizona starting out the season has been pretty unlucky, and now they're starting to finally score some goals here, so I think they'll be a lot better this next week as well, and hopefully we see them climb up the standings. At number 23, I have the Edmonton Oilers. They're right now at a 3-3-1 record, a -2 from last week, but I think they've made some progress here. That game versus Pittsburgh was very tough for them, and I've liked Edmonton's play in the last couple of weeks. It seems like they've been getting better in their own end, and it seems like they've been scoring a lot of goals. So for Edmonton, I think it's on the right pace right now, but overall they're not getting the results quite yet. I think they will this next week, and I look for them to bounce back a little bit. At number 22, I have the Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, they're at a 4-4-1 record. They're a +0 from last week. They're 22 last week. And I think they've made some progress since last week. They got a couple of wins, but a couple of terrible losses for them. Overall, Vegas is kind of in a weird situation. We all expect them to be a lot better, and right now they're kind of disappointing in their own end. The defense is obviously missing Nate Schmidt, so once he returns, I think the Vegas Golden Knights will honestly rise up. At number 21, I have the Dallas Stars. Now, as a Dallas Stars fan, this past week has been frustrating to say the least. They're right now at a 4-4-0 record. They're a -5 from last week. And overall, I've just seen inconsistencies from them. I like their game overall. They've gotten robbed a couple of times by goaltenders, Devin Dubnyk. But so far, I think it's been pretty back and forth. I've seen some great games from them. I've seen some terrible games. And overall, that equals to a 500 record, which is not the greatest. And definitely, I've expected better from them. At number 20, I have the Ottawa Senators. They're right now at a 4-3-1 record. They're a -1 from last week, but overall, I've still liked what I've seen from Ottawa, and they've definitely played a lot better than everybody expected. And to me, I've liked what Ottawa's done. Craig Anderson has been a little bit more decent. That defense has been surprisingly okay, and that offense, some of the guys like Duchesne have had brilliant years so far. So Ottawa is vastly improving on their expectations, and so far, this is probably the best they're ever going to be. At number 19, I have the Anaheim Ducks. They're the biggest dropper at a -10 from last week. Right now, they're sitting at a 5-4-1 record. And to me, I was just waiting to put Anaheim this low. I was waiting until they collapsed a little bit, and this past week, they definitely did. They couldn't rely on John Gibson anymore, and at that point, they weren't scoring goals either. The defense was pretty lackluster. John Gibson, at that point, was pretty much carrying them, and we saw that kind of collapse this past week where he was still decent, but not good enough to carry the Anaheim Ducks to a better record. At number 18, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, they're sitting at a 4-4-0 record right now. They're a -4 from last week, and they got a couple of big losses. A couple of weeks ago, I thought they were on a roll, but this past week, they just really were not able to do too much. They lost a couple of times, and it was a couple of brutal losses. So while I still like Columbus's team on paper, that last week was pretty brutal for them. At number 17, I have the Vancouver Canucks. They're at a 6-4-0 record. They're a +0 from last week, and honestly, they've had a great run so far. I'm not going to deny that, but I think it's just been mainly luck and Bo Horvat absolutely being a beast. While I think that Vancouver has had a good season so far, I think they've been pretty lucky, and honestly, I don't think that this team will ever sustain that. At number 16, I have the Minnesota Wild. Right now, they're at a 4-2-2 record. They're probably one of the biggest risers at a +10, and I've liked what I've seen of them in the last week. They've had some great games, but Devin Dubnyk has stole a couple of games for them. Overall, I don't know if Minnesota is still a playoff team, but right now, Devin Dubnyk has been single-handedly carrying them, pretty much as John Gibson did in the first couple of weeks for Anaheim. At number 15, I have the Calgary Flames. Right now, they're sitting at a 5-4-0 record, a -5 from last week. They got a couple of brutal losses, a couple of close games. I'm not liked what I've completely seen from them so far. And for the Flames, I think they're still going to be a good playoff team, but last week was kind of brutal for them. They were not able to score a ton of goals, and they lost against some key opponents. At number 14, I have the Buffalo Sabres. They're at a 5-4-0 record. They're a +6 from last week. And I like what I'm seeing from them. Their offense has been starting to get rolling here, and they've won the last couple of games here. And right now, they're starting to find a little bit of a grip here on the Atlantic Division. Now, I don't know if they'll be a playoff team quite yet, but in that last week, they gave me a lot of good impressions, and they gave me a little bit of hope for Buffalo maybe being decent this year. At number 13, I have the Chicago Blackhawks. They're right now at a 5-2-2 record. They're a -6 from last week, but it's not like they had a terrible week. It was more like some other teams passed them in the standings, but for me, the Blackhawks still have had a great start. They got some key goaltending, and of course, Corey Crawford is back and ready for the Chicago Blackhawks, which is going to be huge for them in the coming weeks, in the coming months, to maybe hopefully get into the playoffs. At number 12, I have the New Jersey Devils. Right now, they're at a 4-2-0 record. They're a -8 from last week, but kind of like Chicago, there were some teams that really jumped ahead of them. I think they lost 2 games. They still haven't played a lot of games. They've only played 6. So right now, there still is a pretty small sample size for New Jersey. They still had a pretty good season so far, but that last week was pretty rough for them. At number 11, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're at a 4-1-2 record right now. They're at +12 from last week, so I think they're the biggest riser in these power rankings. But I've liked what I've seen from Pittsburgh, especially in the last week. I had some concerns about it in the first couple of weeks. Their defense wasn't the greatest. Their goaltending wasn't the greatest. But they won a couple of key games versus guys like Edmonton, and so far, it's been so good for Pittsburgh, even if they've had some key injuries. Starting off the top 10, I have the Colorado Avalanche. They're right now at a 6-2-2 record, a +5 from last week. Right now, I think they've been playing decent. The goaltending has stepped up a little bit, but in my opinion, it's pretty much a first line there for their entire offense. If that first line of Gabriel Landeskog, Nathan MacKinnon, and Rantanen slows down, I don't know if Colorado will be able to sustain the success that they've had so far. While they have played good in the last week, I have some concerns about them before I raise them too high. At number 9, I have the Carolina Hurricanes. Right now, they're at a 5-3-1 record. They're a -2 or -1 from last week. Right now, Carolina did get that one win. They didn't play a lot in last week. I think they only played 1 game. So for Carolina, they've had a small sample size so far. They have played well. But right now, I still have some concerns about them having that longevity. But I've loved what I've seen from Carolina's offense so far, and that's what's making them so high. At number 8, I have the Montreal Canadiens. Now, this spot in the rankings will surprise everybody, including me. Right now, they're sitting at a 5-1-2 record, a +5 from last week. They played well again this past week, and I had some concerns about them keeping that record. But in the last week, they proved me a little bit wrong there, as they played very well and have kept competitively in that Atlantic Division, which I gotta give them some credit for that. At number 7, I have the Boston Bruins. Right now, they're sitting at a 5-2-2 record. They're +4 from last week, and they've had a pretty decent week. That first line has kept rolling. The goaltending has been shaky, but it has getting a little bit better. The defense, they've lost a couple of guys, namely McAvoy and Miller. They've lost a couple of injuries, or a couple of guys due to injuries. Right now, Boston has still played pretty well, and that first line is rolling, but they're kind of in the same situation as Colorado, to where if that first line slows down, they might be in trouble. At number 6, I have the Winnipeg Jets. They're sitting at a 6-3-1 record. They're +0 from last week, so they were 6 last week. And they played pretty decent. They got a couple of big wins versus a couple of big teams. That loss versus Toronto was pretty terrible for them, but still, Jets have a great future. They have a great shot this year. They've still looked very, very good, even in the past week when it hasn't been dominant. At number 5, I have the San Jose Sharks. They're sitting at a 5-3-1 record, a +7 from last week, and I really liked what I saw from them this week. They got a great win versus Nashville. They've won against a couple of other opponents, and so far, San Jose is starting to finally get back to where they were pegged to be. They had a rough couple of first weeks, but they're starting to finally get wins, and that team is starting to finally gel, which it didn't do in the first couple of weeks. At number 4, I have the Washington Capitals. They're at a 4-2-2 record. Right now, they're a +1 from last week. They had a pretty good week. They didn't play a lot of games, but I honestly liked what I saw from them. The defense is still good. The offense is still good. And right now, they're playing to what I expected them to be, which right now, they're a very good team still. At number 3, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. Right now, they're sitting at a 7-3-0 record. They're a -2 from last week. Last week, I had them at number 1. They had a big win versus Winnipeg, of course, as I said before, but they had a couple of weird losses, especially versus St. Louis, and they're still sitting at a great record. They got off to that fantastic start, then fell back a little bit, but then they started to get a couple of wins, which is big for them to continue that streak. At number 2, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning. So far, they got off to a great start at a 6-1-1 record. They're a +1 from last week, but I really liked what I saw from them this past week. That win versus Colorado showed some guts, and it showed that they can play great defensively. And for the Lightning, they got off to a great start. They haven't played as many games as some other teams, but they've been taking advantage of some lower teams, and they've been taking advantage of some easier schedules and some easier games. So for number 1 for week 3 on the power rankings, I got the Nashville Predators. I've really liked what I've seen from them the past week, and even though that loss versus San Jose was pretty rough, besides that, they were on an amazing streak. I mean, they got 5 straight wins. Right now, they're on a 7-2-0 record. They're a +1 from last week. Last week, they were number 2, but I really liked what I saw from them, even if that San Jose loss was pretty brutal, and it was. Terrible choke, but hey, they're still a fantastic team. But again, I listed out my power rankings, so let me know what your top 5 are for the NHL, your top 5 power rankings teams, and your bottom 5 power rankings teams. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on who are the best teams and the worst teams last week. Now, if you want some more Grav goodness, you can watch this video where I talk about William Nylander and if he's close to a contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that's what for today, guys. If you guys enjoy, make sure you like and subscribe. Again, tell me down below your top 5 teams and your bottom 5 teams in the NHL right now. I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.